Maybe seated. All right, welcome. If you pull out your listening guide, it's inside your program, and it's sort of our roadmap for today, where we're going. We're in a series called Awaken, and the idea is, it's easy just to go through life and just go through the autopilot or just the normal things that we always go through. This is especially true if you have little kids at home. And it's easy to just get a little dry spiritually. So I think with Easter coming up, this is a great season to really focus on us spiritually. So what I want to do is start off by showing you a few pictures and tell me if we can figure out what the common things are in this. So what's the common item? Let's see the first picture. Do you remember this? Some of you have no idea what this is. This is called film. That's what we used to need to take pictures. And if you remember what those days are like, if you want to take pictures, you got to go to the store and buy film. And there's nothing worse than being at the event that you got to take pictures of, and you take a picture, and you realize, you got to rewind it, and it just keeps going and going. You go, oh no, I'm at the end of the roll. Oh, and you may not have any more. And then you cannot take any more pictures. For you young folks, you don't understand what that even means. All right? But we would have to go to the store to buy film and put it into our camera. And then we'd take pictures, and then pray we never run out of film. Then we'd have to go back to the store, believe it or not, to drop off the film. And then we'd go back about 2 or 4 days later, pay about $20 for 10 pictures, and there we go. You remember what that was like? Holy smoke. That was, even just I forgot what all it took, what it used to be. Anyway. Times have changed, haven't they? Let's see the next picture. Remember these? Late 80s, 90s. Man, you were somebody if you had that thing in your shoulder. But here's the truth. You can't carry it more than 5 minutes on your shoulder. It was so big and heavy. You'd walk around Disney World, look like you're CBS, stagger trying to lift that. Let's see the next picture. There's one left. One left. But man, that was a big event to go to the store. Let's see the next one. It takes 20 minutes to call 911. Right? You got to stick your finger. Yeah. Anyway, next picture. They all had quite a smell inside of them, didn't they? Used for many, many purposes, I'm sure. Anyway, you don't see them anymore. Man, let's see the next picture. And we still have these. Now, it seems like they show up about every 7 weeks now, don't they? And it's really small. It's so small you can't read it. And then, I don't know about you, but I take it and it just goes right in the recycle bin. I don't need it. Right? That's why we have Google. Google's replaced it. Let's see the next picture here. Oh, yeah. You know what this is? Man, when I was younger, I grew up, I said, I want to have one of these. Because only important people had one of these on their desk. This is like, imagine if you ran a business and you lost your Rolodex 25 years ago. You were out of business. Man, because that was every contact you had, and you had business cards taped in there, or you specially wrote out on there who they were and what they did, and who their kids were, but some of the specific personal information. Man, if that was your connections, and you can do business based on your connections, based on that. Times have changed, haven't they? Now, what's the common denominator there? Constant moving, technologies. What has happened to all these things? Yeah, they're gone. Let's call it, let's say that in a nice way. They've reached their end, haven't they? Here's what we're going to look at today. Everything has an end, including us and our physical life. We have a physical end. And there's something about death that is just, I don't know, surreal. Because we don't like talking about our own death. And matter of fact, what's funny is, obviously as a pastor, you do a lot of funerals and stuff. And I've been with families who, they know grandpa's dying. They know it's coming to an end. And yet, even though all the signs are there and they know it's approaching, when it happens, they're still surprised, you know? And it shows how our heads know the truth that there's a physical end to us, but our hearts we just don't like to go there. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I think it's important, if we're going to ask God to really awaken us, that we live now with the end in mind. I got a little song we're going to play just a few, like 30 seconds of. I want you to listen to it, and just listen to the lyrics of it.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Lord, I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to die. I don't put a day that I haven't your birth certificate here on earth. Everybody wants to go to
Heaven, nobody wants to die. All right, that's good. That's good. You can only take so much bluegrass, you know. But aren't those lyrics great? Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. We don't like to even think about that. Well, today we're going to look at it. But I promise it won't be painful. I think it'll be awakening or enlightening to us. And here's why it's so important. Though there is a physical end to us, it's not the end of the story. Now, let me ask you, do you remember way back in your school days when you'd show up and the teacher would say, okay, class, put your books away, put everything away. Then they would pause and would say, get out a blank piece of paper and a pencil. Those are the worst words to hear. Because that means pop quiz. Which means it was designed to surprise you so you do not have time to prepare for it. Those are always the worst. Because, you know, man, if you weren't keeping up with it, you were just unprepared, which was always my case. Now, those are horrible events. Here's why I think today is really important, because let me ask you, whether you grew up in church or maybe your first time to church, for everyone, wouldn't it be absolutely horrible if there was a surprise at the end of this physical life, in the beginning of an afterlife, if there was something that caught you off guard that you were not prepared for? That would be horrible. Now, we follow the Bible. We know we can trust the Bible. This is God's word to us. And here's what the Bible teaches. There's an end coming to us physically, but it's not the end of the story. And if there was a surprise, you know what? We don't get a chance to, if there's a pop quiz, we don't get to go to study hall to prepare for it. You know, once we're there, there's no way to make it up. Now, I know some churches teach of purgatory, and it's sort of like this idea of, well, it's like a study hall or jail sentence. You know, you're sort of sent aside for a little bit, but after a while we'll let you out, and then you can come on in. That's a great concept. Only one problem, it's not in the Bible. So I would love that. I wish that wasn't it, but it's not. And so it's really dangerous to build a doctrine on something that's not in the Bible. So once we get there, if there is a surprise for us, we don't get to go prepare. Also, we don't get to go back in time to prepare. There's not a do-over that we can come back here and prepare. At that moment, for each of us, again, whether you're Hindu, Muslim, a nothing, whatever, you're either prepared or you're not. And my heart for you is that you're prepared. That's what God wants, and that's why I think he makes it really clear in the Bible. And so today, we're going to look at a passage. It's a story that Jesus tells. And I'm sharing it because I want you to be prepared. You know, the title of the sermon, Live with the End in Mind. It's really easy to get caught up in really fun stuff here. But let's not be caught up into the here and now that we miss out and we're not prepared at the end of this physical life. Let me give you the context so we sort of understand what's happening, because it's not just a story out of nowhere. But Jesus is teaching in the temple courts, and he has his 12 disciples there. It's a big crowd area, sort of like the outside patio, but there's like a big wall around it, so people are milling around, and their teachers will go out there and teach. And during that time of Jesus teaching, some of the religious leaders would show up, Pharisees, Sadducees, and they're like throwing trick questions at him. They're trying to interrogate him publicly and humiliate him and trying to get him to say something so that later they can go back and use the words to trick him or trap him to say, aha, you broke one of our religious laws. Now you're in trouble, buddy. And, we talk about today about having the religious police. Well, they really had the religious police then, okay? So they had these Sadducees and the captain of the temple court and all these guys that they enforced these things. So they just left there. They couldn't trap Jesus. He leaves. And they're walking. They go outside the city of Jerusalem, outside the walls there. And there's like a hillside, a rugged hillside. It's called the Mount of Olives. And it's a pretty special place here in Jerusalem, and actually for Jesus as well. It's Tuesday of the Easter week. So Friday morning, he would be put on the cross. So we go back to Tuesday, this week of this time. And they go out there, and Jesus begins to teach his 12 disciples what it's going to be like when the end comes, the end of the earth, end of, before there's a new heaven, a new earth, what the day of God is going to be like. So he's sort of giving them, like, big news here. And part of that, again, it's all parables, these stories. And a parable is a story that is an illustration. So it's, again, he's making up the story, the parable, but it tells a truth. There's a purpose to it. It's not just a random thing, but he's like, okay, here's what it's like. And so we're going to look at one of those parables today because I think you and I will learn some important things. 4 things that I think we need to know so that we will be prepared. So if you would join me, let's look at the first verse here. Point number 1, 4 things we need to know to be prepared. The master's entrusted you. Each of us are given certain responsibilities here on this life. So here's what it says here in Matthew 25. For it, and I wrote the kingdom of God because this is what Jesus is talking about. He's saying this is what God's economy looks like. This is what heaven is like, what, again, the new world will be like. This is what's important to God. And then he gives this illustration. It'll be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them to his property. To one, he gave 5 talents. Now, let me say this. A talent is not like the English word talent where you can sing, and we call that a talent. It's basically a currency. So let's just call it this. It's a bag of money. So the owner's getting ready to go on this business trip for some reason, and he's called out some of his trusted servants, or in our culture, it'd be employees. He said, I'm going to be gone, but I'm giving each of you some responsibilities. One guy gets 5 talents. Again, here in the story, it's bags of money, but it's really a bigger application for us. To the another, he gets 2, and to another, 1, or 1 bag. It says, to each according to his ability. And then he, the master, went away. Now, I've often heard this story talked about in a really negative way, like, oh, it's like God going to get you. But here's what I want to point out. If you're working somewhere, the owner or boss, whoever is over you, they go on a trip, and they're going to be gone, and they're saying, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be gone, but I want you to be in charge of this area, this whatever responsibility is, this opportunity. That's a good thing. Like, if you own a business, you pick the best guys you got. Guys who you know are people who are capable of doing this. So the fact that these are, servant is have totally different meaning here in this culture, but it's saying, I trust you. You can do this. And so it's really a compliment to really be chosen. Let me show you here in the story, though, how this is working out. Okay, here in our story, the master is God. Okay, last week we looked at this. It's the idea that sovereign God is in charge of this story we call life. It's his story. Hence, that's where we get master. And now let me say this. Put on your thinking caps. Pop quiz time, classmates. If God is God, you're not him. I trust you know that. If not, ask any family member, okay? You're not God. What does that make us? Thank you. Perfect. Awesome. Perfect. Good job, class. You're servants. That's what we are. We're servants. Again, master, meaning, again, boss man. That fits. And servants, it's our job to do what the master says. That's the relationship. Now, again, you may not like it, but you can't change it. That's the story. Okay? So, there's a master. We are the servants. Okay, now here it says in our verse that we are the master entrusted to them his property. Now, the application here is these guys don't own it. Though the master said, here's the money, here's the responsibility, here's the opportunity, here's the oversight, whatever it is that was given, they don't own that. Now, they're temporarily responsible for it, but it's not theirs. Do you see how that works for us? We're servants, and God says, here's talents and money and these things, all the stuff we have in life. They're not ours. They didn't come from us. They were given to us. And again, we're not an owner, but we still have responsibility of it, just like a trustee. We got to make sure it's used for the right way. Now, again, in the story, a talent, it's a currency, it's money. But for us in the application, it's so much more. Because here's really the context of the story. God is the servant. Master. We're the servants. We don't give him just our money. Like, as a servant, the master's over everything in our life. And really what Jesus is teaching here is that we have resources. We have stuff. We have money. We also have relationships. Like, that's part of our resources. You want to get something done? Well, I know Sally. Sally knows this guy. We can get things done. We have resources. We also have abilities. We have intelligence, knowledge, book smart, experience. All sorts of different things that we have that we know because we've been there or we've learned about it somehow. And so we have abilities. Also, we have opportunities. Again, some of us have traveled far, some of us have not. All different kinds. And so you look at, again, resources, abilities, and opportunities, and we compile a list for each of us. We're all different. There's no one that's like you. So, what the servant is supposed to do is take everything, resources, abilities, and opportunities, and honor the master with all that we have. That's what Jesus is saying here. And then look here at the last phrase that was in the verse. It says, each according to his ability. God's the one who chooses what we have, what resources, what abilities, what opportunities. Now, certainly there's some things we can improve on. We can get smarter. We can, get better at different sports and hobbies and tasks and those kind of things. But there are limits to what we can do. Jeff Iskra will never be a professional basketball player. Look at me. It doesn't matter how much I practice. It doesn't matter how much I pray. It's still not going to happen. For each of us, man, there are just limits of what can happen. Now, again, I'm not trying to put the limit and not saying don't do this, but there are some limits that are out of our control. Again, that's because the master set it up that way. He has a different purpose for each of us, whatever that would be. So let's look at here. We'll continue on in our story. Okay. He who had received 5 talents went at once, meaning immediately began to work. And it says he traded with them or worked with them. He put them to work. And he made 5 talents more. So all of a sudden, there's 10 talents now for this guy. Verse 17. So also, he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. And the third servant had a different strategy. He said, but he who had received 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. So, not good. Let's look at point number 2, the second thing we need to remember so that we're prepared. We need to know that everyone will give an account for resources, abilities, and opportunities. All those things. Look what it says here in verse 19. It says, after a long time, the master of the servants came, and he settled the accounts with them. That phrase, after a long time, just means longer than what they expected. He didn't come right back. And isn't that true for us? We're thinking, man, I don't like to think about the end of this physical life. For some, I don't need to think about the Lord coming. Is he really coming back? He's been gone so long. We get into the autopilot of life, the autopilot, and it's easy to not think about the end. But after a while, he certainly came back. And what he did, he settled the accounts with each one. And that's going to be true for every one of us. We'll be there before the Lord. Now, the Bible speaks of two judgments in this way. One, are you righteous or not? Do you have God's forgiveness because of your faith and trust in him or not? Every week, I always try to give you an opportunity to somehow have a prayer of saying, God, I trust you with my life. I want to give it to you. I trust in what Jesus did on the cross, that when he died on the cross and he came back to life, he proved that he died for sin of the world, but also he conquered it because he came back to life, not just an ordinary man. And I embrace you. My faith is in you to rescue me or save me. But there is a second judgment here. And this parable is really sort of dealing with both, I think, because there's a warning here. If you've not heard, each of us will have to give an account for our life. It's not about are you forgiven, but what did you do with the opportunities given to you? And so, again, if you've grown up in church, this is where I think it's really important for us to remember there will be an account. We'll go here to the next slide. Third thing to remember, there are great rewards for the faithful, for those who accept or embrace the Master's call for our life. So that's why this doesn't need to be sorrow or, oh my gosh, this should be really good news. Look at what it says in verse 20. It says, and he who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, so 10 talents. And he said, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have 5 talents more. Verse 22. And he also who had 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents here. I have made 2 talents more. Now, I skipped verse 21 because it's identical to verse 23. The master says the same things to both guys, servant 1 and servant 2. He's saying, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of the master. Now, here's what I want to see. This is where I think is important for us to know. First of all, the guy who had 5 talents and now 10 got the same reward as the guy who had 2 and now 4. So here's what this means. It's not about how much money do you give God, okay? So just relax, okay? Because that's not what it is. That's not who gives God the most. God doesn't really need your money. We could use it, okay? But different story, teasing. But here's the thing. It's not about that. You can't buy your way in. And it's not about the finances. And here's what it is. It's all about being faithful. This is what it's all about. Because, let's face it, if it was really based on merit or who produced more money or whatever, any other kind of way you'd want to measure that, well, then the guy who had 10 is certainly worth more than the guy who has 4. But it's not. It's not an issue of economy or money or even producing more. It's all about faithfulness, faithful responsibility to the opportunities that God has given you and given me. So this is really what the pop quiz is going to be on. How were you faithful? God's question, I think, to us is going to be, were you faithful with the responsibilities I gave you? And again, we can make that into really good news. Let's look at number 4. We'll wrap it up, finish it up here at the outline. Point number 4 that I think is important to remember. There's great sorrow for the wicked. And that's flat out what Jesus calls this servant number 3. Look, verse 24. He also, who had received 1 talent, came forward. He said, Master, I know you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent, your money, into the ground. Here, have what is yours. Now here's what this shows. This guy did not care about the master. He cared about himself only. Notice the word here, hard man. Hard is really the emphasis here. Think of soil. If you ever seen dirt that's been really dry, it's not had any kind of moisture. It's just hard, like really, really hard. It can be like concrete almost if there's not moisture in there. And that's the picture of what it is. The root word for that word means to be hard, like a drought. And what he's saying, and this is where, again, you see the guys, what's the Greek word for rear end? I don't know. But here's it is, because he exposes who he is. And he's saying, so, I see here, master, you don't have any heart. Who are you? You have no compassion. You don't understand what my life is like. You don't have any understanding about this. And he says, you're in here like a guy who's expecting a lot of money, a lot of just huge wealth based off of someone else's work. Basically, who are you? Okay, that's a great, perfect paraphrase, I think, because the guy's showing zero humility. He doesn't care about the master. He cares about himself. He doesn't like the idea of him being a servant. It's his life. He wants to do it. And this is where it really goes bad for him. Again, now you guys, you're clean up really good. You're good people. You would never think of yourself mouthing off to God like that, would you? No. But our actions can reflect that. When we ignore God with resources, abilities, or opportunities that could be used for him. Look what it says here in the next passage. Because again, just imagine if you mouthed off to your boss like that, he'd probably have a response, wouldn't he? Here's what this guy says in the story. The master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. Literally, you evil and lazy person. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have scattered no seed. Well, then you ought to have at least invested the money with the bankers. And then when I arrive back or at my coming, I should have received what was mine plus interest on top of it. And let's go on to the next one. So take the talent from him. Give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken from him. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So they're just talking about the afterlife. And here's what I want you to see, guys, because this is, I think, the pivot point. Those who are faithful with your resources, with your abilities, with the opportunities you have in life. Again, you don't get to pick them. They just sort of happen. You have them. Those who are faithful, it gets even better. It gets better. But for those who are not faithful now, it gets even worse. Let me show you this next slide here. Here's how I think it applies. Here's how we can live this out. Who are you? This is an easy one to answer because think of all the different things of who you are. Perhaps a spouse, a parent, grandparent, employee, citizen, neighbor, friend, disciple, again, whatever little compartment of who you are. Think of all those different things. Now, in each of those, think, what are you supposed to do? Matthew 22, it tells us really a summary of what God wants is for us to love God and love people. As a parent, what is the best opportunity and ability that you can love God and love others? As a friend, how can you love God and love others? What's the best way as an employee to love God and love others? Again, and in some jobs, there's certain things of what you can say and can't say, and it's out of the bounds. That's okay. Again, that's just a different, unique opportunity. But how can you love God and love others in that opportunity? With all of who our life is, that's really the punchline, I think, for what really we need to focus on. This is what I think is the question that God will ask us at the end of this physical life. Were you faithful in the opportunities and the responsibilities that I gave you during your life? Were you faithful? With all your resources, all of your abilities, and all of your opportunities. There's coming a day when there will be an end to your physical life. But that's not the end of the story. The question is going to be, man, I want you to be ready. I don't want there to be any surprises. And I want so much for this moment to be one of the greatest in your life. My hope is that this will be exactly the answer. That God says, are you faithful? I would love for God to say this verse right here. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, and I'll set over you much. Like there's more for you, more. Enter into the joy of your master. Hallelujah. That's the good word right there. If you would, please bow your head.